Yo, what's going on? My name is Aundre Larrow. I'm a Brooklyn-based visual artist. Welcome to my channel. Here we give you great advice for your creative life. And today we're talking about iPads. So with that in mind, the iPad that I use is the iPad Pro. But for you, I'd recommend the iPad Air. Why? Let's get into it. Our criteria today to talk about these 4 iPads we have is size, speed, and storage. So 3 criteria for 4 iPads. What are the 4 iPads we have? We have the iPad mini, we have the iPad Air, and the iPad Pro. Let's get into it. So, the OG iPad. We're on generation 10 of this thing, can you believe it? This thing sports an A14 Bionic chip. It's pretty fast. And I also always think that the conversations about speed can be overblown because each year I think we get incrementally better. But this does everything I need it to do on a base level. So, sending emails, sending photos, texts, like basic stuff, very, very well. Now, obviously it's not built to support Pro RAW, like maybe the Pro is, but often that's not really what we're working on. So as a base, this is my least favorite iPad, but it's an excellent piece of equipment. So why don't I like it that much? First of all, it has an excellent screen, but it only supports sRGB. The other iPads have a little bit better color and a little bit more dynamic screens. But this iPad is also the least expensive. So it's important to point out that it can deliver most of what you need to do. And if you're living a softly creative life, like maybe you are an art director, maybe you are working on creative things, but you're not expecting this iPad to deliver high quality performance at every moment, this is what you might want. So, things to keep in mind. All 4 of the iPads have 4K video, all 4 have 12 megapixel cameras. This iPad has a 6-core CPU and a 4-core GPU. The core number and the chip number basically let you know how quickly it can do certain things. Now, would I want to edit a crazy number of photos on this? Probably not. But if I'm doing light photo and video editing, the iPad can still deliver. Although it's my least favorite, it's definitely something I'd recommend for my mom, recommend for a kid, I'd recommend for someone just getting into the iPad family and how they'd work on stuff. And since it's the first, you can understand why there are other iterations. What do they bring? I'm gonna talk about the mini next. So when I was doing this, it was surprising. The mini is a fascinating piece, right? So we're talking about size. If you look at the difference between the mini in size, between the mini and the iPad, you're like, this is just a bigger iPhone. But in that is the magic. So for my creatives, obviously screen size is important. However, quality of screen is also very important. So the main difference between the iPad and the iPad mini, besides the fact that it is 2 inches smaller, iPad comes in at 10.9, and the iPad mini comes in at 8.3 inches. This screen has P3 wide color. So it's a little bit better color. You can see things a little bit more dynamically. And more importantly, I like that this works as a really effective piece that you can carry around with you. It's the size of a notebook. So for my art directors, for my assistant directors, this is great for you to carry around with you to quickly reference. It's great for you to have something that possibly doesn't, you can pack it in a bag, a purse, a Pelican case, it can go with you at all times. I've used this before with clients where I'm trying to show them a quick preview of an image, so I can plug a little dongle in that I can show an SD card, like this is what this photo looks like, and keep it moving. It doesn't require even the production of a laptop or even a larger iPad. This is a really great companion piece in my opinion. So this iPad has an A15 Bionic chip, has 6-core CPU similar to that iPad, but has a 5-core GPU. So a little bit more power, but I honestly will tell you probably won't notice the difference. So in terms of maybe something you want to think about in terms of size, maybe this seems small to you, but do you feel like you are someone who likes to take notes, to write on things? This is a great iPad for that. It's great for creative work, and it's the thing that you're most likely to keep with you all the time. If you have smaller hands, this is also a great option for you. So I'm a big fan of this iPad. I was surprised. I assumed when we brought these in that the iPad mini would rank the last for me, but this portability has proven to be very, very interesting. Now, something to point out is it doesn't have smart key folio support, and we're gonna talk about cases later. So if you're typing a lot, it may not be ideal, but as purely a visual device, the iPad mini is a very lovely thing. And I definitely recommend it. I'd recommend it for kids. I'd recommend it for people that are just want a piece to walk around with, they can work with, and possibly just get their work a little bit bigger. So now we come into the winner of this little soiree. Why do I love this iPad Air so much? Let's go back to the regular iPad for 1 minute. If you look on the back of this iPad, we have these little smart connectors. If you look on the back of the Mini, or even on the sides, we don't have them at all. And if you look on the back of the iPad, they're actually on the side. The Air is, I would say, the little brother to the Pro, in that this Pro is almost a 13-inch display. The Air is a 10.9, but this Air has an M1 chip. It has Apple Silicon running, which allows you to do so many different things. It has True Tone, it has P3 wide color just like the Mini, but it's a bigger screen. You come in, you have this thing that has an M1 chip, it has better battery life, it has great color, but most importantly, it allows you to do more work, right? So the reason why I like this iPad Air so much is because it's light, it's inexpensive, and the main thing for me is that the change in storage from 256 to a max of 2 terabytes on the iPad Pro is a big jump. And if you don't need it, you can get everything you need on, I would call this a Pro Lite, right? So how would I use the iPad Air? It's light enough to carry around with me, so it's very similar to the iPad Mini in that way. Next up, it has 5G cellular, and also this little bump right here lets you know that you can magnetically charge an Apple Pencil. Now, why does that matter? When I'm in Lightroom, I can use the Apple Pencil to dodge and burn. I can use it to make specific masking edits. When I'm in Notes, I can take notes, I can draw scenes that I want to shoot, and more importantly, when I'm making decks, I can write in during scouting exactly what I want to capture and what ideas we want to keep, and I can share them with folks. It's a super interactive tool and it's not very large. I don't think you understand the power of being able to walk around with something in your hand like this. That's just a little bit bigger. It allows you to share, look over the shoulder with art directors, and honestly, you can video edit on this. Now, I think the important thing to bring up is with the Pro, you have the M2 chip, you have more size, but this iPad Air has a media engine. It has a media engine. I'll say it again, it has a media engine. So it can help, I think it's encode or decode, I can never remember the word. So it allows you to work and edit through this, through your media more quickly, and allows you to work more quickly. Like that little shift is super, super important. And that shift in price, I think that the iPad Air you can get for about 60% of the price of the Pro. And if you don't think you need things at the peak of speed, this is where you want to go. When I first moved to New York, I used to work with a rental company, and the president said this thing I always thought about. He said, everyone has champagne tastes on beer budget. We all want to have apartments that are next to the train, that are huge and spacious and have all this light, but everything's a trade-off, right? So once again, we're talking about the 3 S's: size, speed, and storage. This has the speed. And honestly, it has a pretty good size. And the only thing that's really lacking is the storage. So what does the storage matter? The storage matters when you're importing raw photos. Storage matters when you are trying to save things directly to the iPad. But 256 gigabytes is still pretty big. And honestly, if you ask us from 1998 or even 2005, we would be flabbergasted. Now, I'm saying all this to you because I don't know what your price point is. The magic of the iPad, like many things that Apple does, is that they price discriminate, which is a fancy economic term for they understand what you are trying to get as a customer. So to do that, they come up with something like this behemoth, my best friend, the iPad Pro. So if we start with storage, like I said, this thing can hold up to 2 terabytes. So that means when I finish a big project, if I want to plug in a hard drive, this not only has a USB-C connector, but it also supports USB 4 and Thunderbolt. So the speed of import is important here. So now you're there's this little jump. So if we kind of tier them out, I'd put the iPad Mini and the iPad in one tier, which is the soft creative, the iPad Air as the do everything you need creative, and the iPad Pro as the Carhartt creative, right? The heavy duty, we're trying to get it done. This thing has a 12 megapixel regular camera. It also has a 10 megapixel ultra wide on the M2 chip, and it has 10 GPU cores. It has all these kind of cool tools that allow you to plug this in directly to a screen. It allows you to multitask because of the M2 chip. And so it's not only fast, but it has a lot of things I like. It has Face ID. It allows me, just like the iPad Air, to snap my Apple Pencil directly on and connect it. It can support Wi-Fi, even faster Wi-Fi speeds. People always ask this question, can I replace my laptop with this? It depends on what you're doing. For me, this is a device that I edit my photos and I edit my videos on. I find it to be super helpful because I can get really interactive. I can move things around in my timeline. I can get really granular with how I mask my images. I don't necessarily view this as a storage device, but this is something that comes with me all the time. It's how I send emails when I'm in cars, crammed in between spaces, how I edit photos on planes. It's how I work with creatives when I'm looking at my mood boards or shot lists, all those things. Now you probably this far into the thing, and if you're still asking, do I want an iPad? The answer might actually be no. You should never feel stressed to spend your money on something if you're unsure if you need it. In 2017, 2018, I got my first iPad, and it really impacted my workflow. Because then what I would do is I would import my images, not here because the Mac Studio didn't exist before, but I'd imported it on the Mac Mini I had at that time. And I would sit and sit and sit and just make selects and edit at the computer for hours. And the thing that shifted for me is now that I use a cloud-based editing service like Lightroom, I can import, go about my day, and then I can sit down on a couch, on a plane, on wherever I can and edit. I don't need to be in one position. And that supports kind of the creative life we live now, one that's constantly in motion. Other thing to point out, this thing's battery life is great. I bring it everywhere with me. I just had it in Guyana, I brought it to Oklahoma, I brought it to Alaska. I brought it all these places with me because I know when I need to show work and when I need to finish work, this is the right tool. So once again, let's talk about this in conclusion. Which is the best iPad for you? For me, as we're calling the Carhartt Creative, the iPad Pro. It's fast. It charges quickly with USB-C support. It has a little bit faster Wi-Fi connection than the other things. It has up to 2 terabytes of storage, and it has a giant, almost 13-inch screen. But if I wasn't ready to drop that, a band or two on that, the iPad Air is excellent. Something else to point out about the iPad Air that I think is a little misconception. The iPad Air and the iPad actually aren't all that different in size. iPad Air is just a little bit thinner. They're about the same in weight, and they're about the same in storage. But this has Apple Silicon and a media engine. So if you're a creative like me, you're unsure if you can afford a Pro, but you really want to interact with your work in a more hands-on way, I'd really recommend the Air. You can get it on Black Friday, you can get it even on a regular day, like at around $700 or less, which is pretty good. And so, in conclusion, the Mini's for the homies. It's fun, it's easy for you to bring around with you. The Air's the pick, the Pro is the big bro, and the iPad is a nice base model. And I would recommend to you, always assess size, speed, and storage. Storage you can change, the other two things you can't. So, I would recommend the iPad Air for that very reason. But before we go, let's talk about cases, because I think this actually does a couple things for you. So we have a couple different cases. This is a case we have for the iPad Mini. This essentially just acts as a protection. So it slips in, you can use it to open and close, and have it sit. Now we're going to talk about the reason that I brought up these smart connectors from before. Remember, the iPad has these smart connectors on the side, which I don't love. And so as a result, the Smart Folio case, I think kind of loses the magic. It becomes a little segmented. What do I mean by that? I mean that this requires like too much space to exist. This is a good tool maybe if you're cooking and you need to like look at it or play or anything like that. But generally, I just find this to be less helpful than the Smart Folio case you can get with the iPad Pro and the iPad Air. Also, word of the wise, I've had one, do not get a white case. Now let's look at the cases that I think really matter. These are rad, although they only open in one direction. They allow you to work in a small area in all the ways that you might like for a laptop. So, you notice the smart connectors connect in the back. Hear that lovely little snapping sound. The thing I wanted to point out that's really cool is this case acknowledges one of the tiny little design, I wouldn't call it flaws, but things with the iPad. Right now on the iPad, you can only charge with this USB-C port. But with this case, you can charge on this side. So no matter which direction the plug is, you can still work really well. And this closes in a hard shelling case. I really like it. The hinge is good. I've had it for a while. And lastly, because once again, I think that the Mini is great, but the Air is a true heir apparent to the Pro. The case is similar. Same thing. Lastly, I want to talk about the Apple Pencil. So the Apple Pencil is the thing that is super, super special. On the iPad Pro, you can have pressure push, you can have hover, you can tap. So this is really helpful for folks that are illustrators. You don't get all of those features on the Air, but you get most of them. I believe the hover is the only thing that you're missing. But the reason I'm bringing up the Pencil is on the iPad, it doesn't have support for the magnetic charging. So you have to plug it in to charge it. This can be a little funny, and I personally find it to be kind of frustrating. Versus with the iPad Pro and the Air, you can snap the Apple Pencil directly onto the magnetic surface. It charges it and it automatically pairs it. So you can share a pencil between folks. Like if you have a bunch of kids that are super creative, just you can share the pencil between them. So with all that in mind, let me know if this was robust enough. Let me know if you have any questions. But from a fellow visual artist, fellow creative, trust me when I tell you, this is a great thing to add to your arsenal. When you're ready for it, get it. And if money is the thing you're focusing on, get the Air. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so quick addendum. Obviously, time jumped. I'm wearing different clothing. It's because a week after I made this video and talked about how I didn't love the Magic Keyboard Folio, I kind of see the point now. Here's why. So the Magic Keyboard Folio I feel is kind of clunky because it's built for you to use vertically, so you can kind of take the keyboard off and reference it at any point, or horizontally, where you can sit and type with it. The reason I didn't love it is I primarily use my iPad in a horizontal fashion for typing, making edits and things like that, and I don't love that it, unless I put this back down, it can't really hold up by itself. So I can't really use it in my lap, I use it in tight spaces. But this week, I was working on set, and I was outside in a place where there's not a lot of good spots to put things down. So I was stuck with my Magic Keyboard, and I couldn't put it down. So I was holding it like this to review things with a client, and it's very awkward, right? Kind of the point of, one of the things that I like about an iPad is you can hold it with one hand. So after the Scout, I actually ran to the Apple Store and got a smart folio. And so then I could use it from being horizontal to using it vertical, because I'm crazy and I'm afraid of dropping it. And then it got back to the thing that I like, which is being able to hold it. Now, this and this are kind of expensive. So if you find yourself in a position where you will use it a lot in both orientations, I would recommend this, Smart Keyboard Folio. The thing I was just talking mess about earlier in this video, it works if this is an orientation that works for you. If you are a contractor, you're typing a lot and referencing illustrations, drawings, an architect, a stylist, a photographer, and you need to kind of go in between those two things, this is the right case. I can be wrong, so I appreciate you sticking it out with me. Thank you again for watching this video. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, tell your friends. Peace.